Welcome to the broadcast network. We're really encouraged actually to see so many of you logged on, tuning in to listen live this evening. If you're new to broadcast and you haven't had a chance to look at all our fabulous resources online or watch any of our previous live sessions, let me just outline this session and how it's going to run. In a minute, I'm going to hand over to Tim Simmons, one of the broadcast team, and he's going to be interviewing John and Abi for about 30 minutes. After that, we get our exciting interactive part, which means you get to put your questions to John and Abi, or Tim. The way you do that is you just click on the questions box, type away, and I will be able to see what you're asking, whether it's something for clarity, whether you want to dig deeper, or maybe it's something that hasn't been covered as part of John and Abi's story tonight. So on to tonight, which I have to say, genuinely I have been looking forward to for the last few days, because I met John and Abi Flavell from Hull about October last year at our Church Planters 24 Hours Away gathering. So I kind of followed their journey a little bit. They planted, at that time, well, they were starting to plant River City Church in Hull. So tonight, Tim is going to be interviewing them to hear about how the last year has been. I think it's fair to say it's been a fairly eventful one. And you can read, after tonight, you can read more about this on Abi's award-winning blog, Surrender My Agenda. So please make a note of that and look that up later. So for now, it's for us to sit back, enjoy, listen, think of your questions, be challenged, inspired, and enjoy getting to know John and Abi. For now, I'm handing to Tim. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello.
Right, you guys can hear me. I can hear you. Very good. Well, we are going to just talk about really the first year of church planting, and I was thinking a bit about it today, and I developed a brief theory in my mind that actually the first year, obviously being very critical, but you find out a huge amount about yourself, about your church, maybe about what the next few years are going to be like in the first year. I know that's true for us. We're kind of going through the first year all over again, and I'm remembering things of what it was like the first time around. So actually, I'm really interested to dig into your first year, how that's worked for you, and how you feel about it. So I guess perhaps the best place to start would be how you felt called to plant, why you felt like you should go where you should. Tell us a little bit about that part of the story.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Great to see you all, sort of, through the internet. Yeah, we have in the last year planted River City, and the journey that got us to this place is kind of in two parts, and I'll try and cover both. Firstly, it was for our sending church as a whole to feel called to plant a church in the first place. So we were based in a church called Jubilee Church in Hull, and we had been part of planting that church 10 or so years ago. And what happened was, after 7 or so years, Steve, the senior leader there, went away on a sabbatical. And when he came back, he asked some very honest and good questions to us as leaders around the future of Jubilee and where we thought we were going. And he obviously had time to reflect himself, and he felt like we should try and plant a church by the time we reached our 10th anniversary. And so we started to talk and pray about that as an eldership team. I was part of that team then. And we asked the church to pray about it as well. And we had a prayer meeting where we invited people to pray and see if they felt God was saying anything about, if we did plant a church, where we might go. And so people shared a few prophetic words on that evening around an egg with 2 yolks and an elastic band on a pin that was stretched but not broken. And then someone else sent us a prophetic word about a bridge with two pillars that held up the bridge, and that made the bridge strong, and it meant more people could cross over the bridge effectively into the kingdom of God. And so as elders, we went away and we started to talk about those things and felt like God was indicating that he wanted us not to plant too far away, but to stay relatively close to Jubilee in order to plant a church that would strengthen Jubilee, and we could work together for the kingdom. And while we were talking about that and praying about that, we looked at areas around the city, and particularly into the east of the city. We were based in the city centre, but we weren't really getting any people from the east, and we felt like maybe that was the right place to go. There was just a big population there and very few churches. And the next day we were headed to a conference all about the nations and about mission, and I said quite jokingly, maybe tomorrow at this conference, so the speaker will say to us, east, 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 and we'll know that we're supposed to go to East Hull. And we went to the conference, and in the coffee break in the morning, it wasn't the speaker, but actually one of our church members, a lady called Jane, came up to me and said, John, I don't know why, but since you asked us to pray about a church plant a couple of months ago, and I just felt like God spoke something really clearly to me, but I haven't been able to share it with you, but I've just felt compelled right now to come and say east, east, east to you. And I don't know what that means, but I just felt like God wanted you to hear it. So I pulled that kind of, oh, that's very interesting kind of face, don't want to give it away. But it was clear confirmation for us as a church that East Hull was the place he wanted us to go. And so we told the church that, and we asked people to start to pray and consider whether or not they felt called to be part of that church plant. For us personally, the journey was slightly different. So obviously I'd been part of that decision-making process and had seen God speak quite clearly to us as a church about planting in East Hull, but I pretty quickly dismissed the idea of me doing that. I didn't feel in any way equipped to lead a church plant. I didn't feel like I wanted to, really. I was very happy in Jubilee. I'd been in Hull for quite a long time before Jubilee came, and had been praying for a church like Jubilee to come, and so felt that a lot of the things I'd asked of God and the promises that he'd given me had been fulfilled there, and so just didn't feel any kind of itch or desire to go or any vision for going. And so I just kind of wrote it off. And then Abby and I went out for lunch one day and had quite a difficult conversation where she said, so how are we going to weigh up this thing about planting in East Hull, and how are we going to talk about it, and are we going to drive around East Hull and pray about it and ask God, and because I think that we should take it seriously, and I just kind of said, no, we're not going, and she started to cry, and basically quite rightly challenged me about whether or not I was involving the whole family in the decision, or whether I was just making it an executive decision on behalf of the whole family. And that really kind of challenged me. It shook me a little, and I had to repent of basically refusing to even be willing to listen to what God might want for us. And so we started a process of praying about East Hull, of driving around East Hull, of looking around, and gradually over the next few months, all of the reasons that I had not to come, God dealt with, and he dealt with them quite specifically one by one. So he dealt with my feelings of inadequacy, he dealt with my unwillingness to give up Jubilee, and spoke to me a lot about Abraham being willing to sacrifice Isaac and give up things that he loved. and he spoke to us both about the vision of the church plant, which was something I didn't feel like I had, and God very clearly gave it to us. So we came to a point, summer 2015, where we felt fairly positive about the idea of going, but we really wanted some confirmation. And we went on holiday to Norfolk, and while we were there, went and visited Abi's old church in Norwich. And so we were just there as tourists, really. We weren't there to do anything. We were just on holiday, relaxing. On the way there, we'd been talking about the church plant again and whether or not we felt God was saying anything. And we just were very open to maybe God will speak to us while we're here. And we went to the church on a Sunday morning, and they had a guest speaker who was speaking all about the call to go on mission. And he spoke about James and John asking Jesus if they could sit on his right and his left, and how Jesus rebukes them in love and says, effectively, you're asking the wrong question, because you're asking to be in a place of comfort. And Jesus doesn't condemn them for wanting that. He just points out that that's the wrong thing to want. And so I'm there kind of having gone through this whole process of God softening me to the idea of going and dealing with all of my reasons not to. And it just felt, yeah, actually, God's done that with me. He's very lovingly and kindly kind of corrected me and rebuked me, but for not listening. And he's lovingly won me over to the idea of church planting. And then he finished his preach all about mission and going with a quote. And the quote was from probably one of my favourite books of all time, which is The Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis. And the question comes to Reepicheep: how are you going to get to Aslan's country, which is effectively the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven? And Reepicheep says, well, I'm going to sail in my boat east, and when I can sail east no further, then I'll get out into my coracle and I'll paddle east, and I'll paddle east until I can paddle no further, and then I'll get out and I'll swim east until I can swim east no further, and then I'll sink with my nose towards Aslan's country. And that repetition again of east, 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 in that moment, we both just knew the Holy Spirit was saying, you're to go. And so we both burst into tears, and we spent the rest of our holiday talking about what that could possibly mean for us as a family if we were to go.
So, yeah, very interesting. It's interesting that that whole journey was started off by someone asking a question, isn't it? And which is, it's important to talk about that, because often when we talk about church planting and the call to church planting, the importance of someone at the beginning maybe making the big call or asking the right question, and then through that you're suddenly open to God speaking. It's just very powerful, isn't it? Abi, why don't you tell us what the big vision is in 5-10 years time? What do you imagine River City Church being?
Well, part of us asking God, are you sure this is right? You know, if this is right, if you're speaking to us about going, we need you to give us a vision for it, because we just don't think we could ever carry something different to Jubilee. We couldn't ever imagine ever having anything different to that, and so we needed God to speak again. And he was just very clear with us, so we began to kind of talk about things that we'd felt God saying in that season of weighing up whether we should go or not. And I often get very restless with things if I feel like God's speaking. And I, in one night, received 3 different passages of the Bible from God and from other people who brought it to us, to me, about water and about being streams of living water. And so one of them was Isaiah 55, come all who are thirsty, and come buy wine and milk without money. An invitation for all who are looking to be satisfied to come to God. Another, Ezekiel 47, about the river of God flowing out of the temple, and then Jesus, and then the passage in John about Jesus standing up on the last day of Tabernacles, where he says, "All who are thirsty, come to me." So we're starting to compare notes, and then I took those verses to John. I was like, I'd never noticed this, but the water out of the temple flows east, and I think God might be speaking to us. And then John had a prophetic word as he'd been away to South Africa a few weeks before that, and a guy had said to him that he believed the church plant, although we didn't know we were going at the time, the church plant out of Jubilee would be one that would bring streams of living water into the place where it went. Streams of living water in terms of culture, changing the culture of the area that we moved into, in terms of bringing life, bringing prosperity, bringing culture, the arts, the freedom, bringing all kinds of goodness. And so we began to study those passages, and I'd never really realised how often the Bible refers to water as being like God's presence. And so you see in the Garden of Eden that the Genesis garden is like the first temple, and it has rivers flowing out around from it, and we understand that God's presence dwelt there. And all the way through the Bible, even up to Revelation, you've got this metaphor in the Bible of God's presence being like streams of living water, and it changing all of the atmosphere around it, bringing life wherever it went, like a river would do in a desert. And it being about moral purity, it being, and often the reverse of that metaphor is present as well in the Bible. It shows that dryness or parched lands are immoral places. And so God began to speak to us about the church being like streams of living water arriving in a dry and thirsty land. So this place that we've moved into, East Hull, it's a working class kind of environment. There are a few churches here, mostly traditional, probably none of them very large, and probably very, very few people go to church here, or have ever really had, maybe have had a church background in the past years ago. And so I think we've arrived here believing that God wants to bring change to this area. He wants to shape culture. He wants us to bring life, but the life will come out of his presence. And us being the new temple, that he fills us. And as we go and interact with other people around us, as we go and set up projects, as we go and set up all kinds of things as a church, we will draw people into a relationship with the only one that satisfies, the one who can give them living water. And we know that there are lots of thirsty people around here. We've just got to go out and meet them. And so I think 5-10 years time, thriving church, but full of the people that live here. So reaching the working classes, reaching the lower middle class, just anywhere and everywhere. We just want to bring life, positivity. People feel quite downtrodden here. I think there's a mentality of, I'm not good enough, I can't hope for any better, everyone's forgotten us, we need to just get on with it on our own, very self-reliant, and a lot of distrust to outsiders or anyone that doesn't have a full accent or has lived here 40 years. And so we've just hit the ground, and we want to see people come to know Jesus and find life in him. Just very simple. I don't think that we've got like a what will a church look like plan. I think we just want to be obedient to, let's go meet some thirsty people and have them satisfied in him.
Very good, very good. Well, I feel like we've got in this what you guys have been saying, the big picture, I suppose, the calling, why we're going, what we want to achieve. But let's get into brass tacks. Let's talk about the first year. Yeah, let's just, so I guess tell us what your biggest success in the first year, as you look back and think, yeah, we did that well, that went well, that's borne fruit for us, that's been a good thing. Tell us what you think those things are.
So I guess the culmination of our success has happened this week in terms of the biggest thing that's happened for us. So this last Sunday we had our first baptisms, and we saw 4 people get baptized, 4 new Christians, all from East Hull, who were either new to church or had been away from church for a very long time but had never really made that commitment to Jesus for themselves. And it was just a joy to see the fruit of all of the work that our team have done in trying to love people in this community, trying to make friends, trying to reach out to people. It's peaked at that point for us, and we were told that statistically most church plants don't see anyone saved in the first year, we knew we bucked that trend pretty early because our first new Christian came through on week 2, but to get to 4 was it's just been incredible. And what I love, I think, is that they've all come different ways. And so the first was a close friend of Abby's who we had known for quite some years because she was their kids were in the same school as ours, and Abby had befriended her on the school run, and they'd been to Jubilee a few times on and off, and they were quite interested in what we were doing, and they were quite sad about us leaving and moving away from where we lived, and so Kim, the lady, committed kind of, I'm going to come to your new church because I want to see why you're leaving us and going to the other side of the city. And then there was a couple who came through leafleting, and this was something we saw with at the church planting weekend in October with Pete and Nikki Cornford. Pete said, he delivered 10,000 leaflets around his area, which we haven't got anywhere near yet, but and it gave him the opportunity to pray for that area and to really invest in that area in prayer, and it gave him a love for that area. And so we were inspired by that and came back and said, right, we're leafleting, we're going. And we got a load of leaflets and sent our team out to do that, mainly with the intention of building our love for the area and getting to know it, more than expecting people to come on a Sunday because they got a leaflet. But actually this couple did, and so they've become Christians through that. And then the last person was a guy who had been known to Jubilee because he'd really gone through quite a difficult period in his life, and had gone through some homelessness and had just started to get back on his feet, but was living in East Hull. And so when we started, it was much easier for him to get to us without any money than it was to travel into the city centre. And so he started to come to us, and we got the privilege of kind of serving him, of loving him, of helping him find some accommodation, helping him to try and piece his life back together again. Amazing guy. And so all 4 of the people we baptized came from different places, different backgrounds, different situations, and have been reached in different ways by us. But it was just amazing to see that everything that we've done has borne fruit in a way that none of it's wasted, that God kind of honors it and loves it and sees it all. And so I guess our encouragement would be, don't dismiss, cast your net as wide as you can. Don't dismiss certain means as, oh, well, we won't get anyone through that or that. Try everything, have a go at everything, because you don't know who's waiting for that leaflet to come through the door, or who's waiting for that invitation. And so that's probably been our biggest success.
It's a good answer. It's hard to argue with that, isn't it? Very good. Actually, it's true. I think both of the church plants we've done, actually, in the first year, we have not seen much in the way of salvation at all. It takes a good year, 18 months before that starts kicking in. So it's great. It's really good news. Tell us, I'll put this question to Abby, what the biggest challenge of your first year has been, like whether in the church plant or just like within family, had the impact of moving and all that sort of stuff? What the biggest challenge has been?
I think the biggest challenge has probably been just the emotional cost of leaving friends, leaving our beloved Jubilee, having to say goodbye to some people. We haven't moved far, but we know that changes your relationships with them, and it was a big personal cost to us. Emotionally moving the children into a school where we know this area is not renowned for good schools. It was quite a cost for us to deliberately choose a school that had previously been in special measures. It's now out of those, and to choose to get involved there, to choose to hand my children over to a different community and trust that God had them, knowing that He'd spoken about it, to walk through streets that are very deprived in lots of ways. So I think my first school run, we walked past a former strip club. I walked through the middle of a gang of youths talking about having a knife fight, and a very, very drunk man nearly stumbled into my kids. I think they were on their bikes, and it was just a shock, I think, at the time of having moved from quite a nice middle-class area, realising just the difference of life. So emotionally, it's been very up and down. I think personally, John and I have gone through you go through self-doubt. You take a whole team with you. It's hard at the beginning. In fact, it's hard most of the time in the first year. And they're all looking to you. They look at you. They want reassurance. They want to know that you've got it all together. They want answers. And it's been a privilege and an honour to lead an amazing team of people. But we've had to say we're finding it really hard to. Emotionally, we're up and down. We're hanging on to Jesus every day. We are trusting that He spoke very clearly. We know it's tough. We know it feels hard to have left those friends and family. We know it's small right now. We know we've left a big church environment to come to a small church environment. It's just a massive sense of stripping away in the first year. So I think the biggest challenge has been for me personally, it's been keeping myself upright emotionally, not quitting, not backing down, not getting angry with God, not giving in to self-doubt. But it's meant sleepless nights, it's meant battling in prayer, it's meant hanging on to Jesus every day, and it's been wonderful, but also incredibly difficult.
We went to an event in Leeds a month or so ago where Andy McCulloch was speaking, who some of you might know, and he said something that really kind of got hold of me. He was talking about being missional, and he said whenever God calls us into mission, whenever we step into mission, we confront fear, and God wants to use that so that we can cut the head off that fear. But you will always find, if you are obedient and you go on mission, you will confront fear. And I just realised that a lot of my heart was still controlled by fear. It was fear that had stopped me wanting to go church planting in the first place, that I'd been afraid I couldn't do it. I was afraid that I didn't have the vision. I was afraid I wasn't the man for the job. But we'd come, and I thought I dealt with it. I thought coming was enough, and that I'd kind of, and so almost we'd arrived, and I'd gone, right, God, I've done the tough bit. We've left Jubilee, we've moved, we've started this church. Now you do your bit, which is send a load of people and build us a nice big church. And I realised as Andy was speaking just that I was still really afraid, that I was. I lived in East Hull, but I was hiding myself away from it. I wasn't trying to connect with the people. I wasn't brave enough to do that. I would still travel across Hull to the nice coffee shops that I used to go to. I would stay in my house and work from home. I wasn't stepping into and confronting the fear of, actually, God's asked me to love these people, and He's asked me to come to share that love, with them. And so for me, the challenge has been to constantly be going back to Him and asking Him to help me kill that fear, asking Him to help me not allow it to control me, but to trust Him, and to step into the mission He has for me, and for Him to give me the bravery, I suppose, and the courage that I need to do that.
It's very good. I think God's very kind in that He doesn't tell us how scary it is until we're there. So at that point, otherwise nobody would go. Sorry, if you're considering church planting tonight and you're watching this, it's fine. It's fine. You won't sleep. It's awful. That's very good. I'm interested in something you said. I can't remember which one of you it was. Like basically the transition from Jubilee to River City, where it's you're going from a big church with just like you can do so much stuff, and staffing and venues and finance and all of that. And also just having a big group of people on a Sunday it's not a bad thing at all. It's very comforting to go in, and also you can do things pretty well. So everything's done better when there's more of you, production-wise. And then you go to a much smaller group, and when a lot of you have kind of your core team, all of you have gone from one thing to another. How did you help people do that journey? Because it's not a simple journey to do at all, and actually it's probably quite underestimated, the impact of that. People get a bit snobby about it. Well, actually we shouldn't want to go back to the big thing. Actually the big thing has a lot of value, and you kind of feel it, don't you, when you miss it? Yeah. So how did you navigate your team through that?
Well, I think we got help, which we've been talking about on broadcast this month, but so we have a great kind of mentor and coach in Matt Hatch in Leeds. So he has been coming in and helping us as a team to know what to expect, what's going to happen, how to deal with it all. Steve and Dan at Jubilee were great in terms of the way that they tried to prepare us as leaders and as a team, and their ongoing support for us in that. But I think no matter how much we told people, it's going to be hard. No matter how much we told people, there's a real cost. No matter how much we tried, it's really hard, because when you're asking people to come, you're kind of selling it like it's going to be amazing and it's going to be great and come with us and God's leading us and we're going to do all this stuff. But also consider that it's going to be really tough and it's going to be hard. And I think people don't really kind of work out for themselves how those things sit together until they're in it. And I think, as you said, with the fear, it's just not real until you're there. Mm. And so for most of our team, they probably had expectations or thoughts of what it would be like, and it probably hasn't fitted for any of them. They've all responded probably in a way that they weren't expecting to the journey that we've all been on. And I think what we've had to do, what we're trying to do, is we're trying to build a culture in the church where we're vulnerable with one another about how we are feeling about it. And so when people have found it really tough, we've wanted them to be free to express that and not feel like they're doubting God or the call of God or the mission that we're on or any of those things. It's just hard sometimes. And so we've done that publicly. We've, when we've preached or led on Sundays, we've often talked about how we as leaders are feeling the cost and how difficult it still is for us, in order to give our team permission to talk about those things as well. We've tried to make sure that our door is always open if people want to talk about how they're feeling about how things are going. We're trying very hard to make sure that we're loving one another and supporting one another in that as well, whilst also trying to help people not to fall into cynicism or grumbling or complaining or disillusionment, because those things are, those are the places the enemy wants to lead us into. When we have those negative feelings, and we're trying to say the feelings aren't wrong. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel like it's tough. It's okay to struggle. But we need to take those things back to God. We need to take them to Him. We need to receive healing if that's necessary. We need to be able to give those things to Him and trust Him. We need to encourage one another as much as we can, so that we are helping one another through those difficult patches.
It's very good. Very good. I'm aware we're now cutting into the Q&A, but I'm going to ask one more question.
Because I'm expecting some stinkers from some of our team. So
yeah.
less questions, the better.
So very briefly, what are you going to do next? What's the next thing? What are you excited about?
So we are about to launch our midweek groups. So John was amazing in that I'm not really a details person. I'm kind of bigger vision, like some strategy and the prophetic and here's where we're going and stuff. But I'm not really the details. John went away and worked out kind of what do we want our midweek groups to be focusing on. How do we do both mission and discipleship really well? So how are we reaching non-Christians, and how are we taking our people, shaping them, molding them, making sure their relationship with God is the best that it can be, because out of that place will flow everything else. How do we do those things together without one of them becoming overemphasized and taking away from the other? And so we did a lot of. John did a lot of reading. We talked about it. John's gone away and written some great material about finding a rhythm within our midweek group, so that we can both focus on mission and discipleship within one night a week, but throughout the month that we have a rhythm of on this night of the week, the same night a week each time, but on the first and third nights you'll be in your mission teams, thinking of mission, doing socials, bringing non-Christians in. On the second one we're doing a prayer meeting. On the third one, you're meeting as a discipleship huddle, smaller group. And so we're going to trial that basically and see how it works. We'll probably take the church through it for 6 to 9 months, see how we get on, iron out the problems as we go, and see if we can do both well and go to the right depth with each. We'll see if it's possible. I like the beauty of church planting because you are a smaller entity, smaller ship, smaller rudder, very flexible. So we're quite happy to make some mistakes and revise things as we go.
Very good. Very good. Right. I will hand back to Hannah now. If you're listening, Hannah, it's not an awkward silence. You can tune back. There you go. Very good. Hannah, back over to you.
Wonderful. Oh my word. I feel the pressure of time because questions are coming in and I could just keep listening to you guys. I really could. So, okay, I've asked for lots of questions. The first one is actually a comment. I've never had this before. Someone from River City wants you to know that they love you very much. How fabulous is that?
We love you too, whoever you are. Please make yourself known to us.
It was Luke. Right, now, the first question is a quick one. What ages are your children?
We have 2 sons. Noah is 7 and Judah is 4.
Okay, and they were presumably then 3 and 6 when you moved?
Yeah, around then.
Around then. Okay, that's helpful, thank you. Right, the first kind of main thing people are asking about is basically transitioning from being part of a bigger leadership, to a smaller one. So let's just read these. In a big church, leadership is shared. As a church planter, you're often the only leader or couple. Have you found it lonely? Hold on. And the second question on that topic was, what's your biggest challenge in transitioning from being part of a leadership team to being the sole leaders? So can you just talk to us a little bit about that? Thanks.
Yeah, so I think we are blessed with an incredible team.
They're all amazing.
And so we have a ton of leaders within that team, and that has made it far easier than it could have been. And so we don't underestimate that blessing, and we know that that's not the case for everyone. But certainly God has been really good in sending us some great people, and so we have found it very easy to share the load with them and to trust them to carry it well with us. And so
great job.
That's not been too difficult. I think, however, there is loneliness. There is a great deal of loneliness at points, because you are very aware of your isolation, and there are just things that you've got to do that mean that you end up feeling that cost more. So, for example, I was working full-time for Jubilee, and so I benefited from that leadership being present kind of every day in my life. The other two elders and other leaders in the church were around the church, were available, and so if I had a question or I needed to talk about something or I was struggling, there was someone there all the time, pretty much. Now I'm bivocational, so I've got another job 3 days a week. I'm trying to fit church leadership in around that, and when I'm doing work stuff for church, Abi might well be out taking the kids to school or coming back, or at a club with them, or seeing somebody in the church, and so there's just that void of, actually I simply don't have the time a lot to call up the guys from Jubilee or to go and see them or whatever. And so those sorts of choices you have to make when you're in a smaller church that can't employ somebody, that can't sustain a team like that, do make you feel the cost. And so we've had to make sure that that we as a couple are providing that support to each other much more intentionally, talking about everything, how we're feeling, how we're doing, praying for each other. And this whole process, this whole transition has transformed our marriage in a lot of ways in terms of how we've done that, because I was part of an eldership team of men and would often process that stuff with them, and now I have the privilege of doing that with Abi, and that has just been so good for us together. It's given her an insight into my life as a leader in the church, but also drawn out the leadership in her, and that's been amazing to see. And then it's important that you just have others outside of your situation who you can go to as well. I mean, like I said, we're honest with our team, we talk with them, and they're amazing at lifting us up and supporting us. But we have friends in other churches, in other church plants, and they're feeling it too. And so Abi was speaking to a friend, they've gone internationally to plant a church, and they were talking on Skype, and just both of them talking about the loneliness of it and how difficult it was. And so Abi's like, well, why don't I come and visit you and we can be lonely together? And so Abi's heading out there this weekend to see them, because there is that sense of understanding, that empathy for one another, that they understand each other and therefore they can encourage one another. And so I'd just say build a network that's broader and bigger than just within your own team or even within your own city, but go to the church planting weekend, get on broadcast, get in a masterclass, all that stuff. We're doing it all because we knew, even when we started, we knew we need all the help we can get. We are just going to be unashamed in kind of taking from people everything that they're willing to offer us in terms of support, and doing that has provided us with a net beneath us that has really helped in times of when we're lonely or when we're struggling or when it's hard.
Phenomenal answer. I'm loving the plug for the weekend. Of course, we're doing that again this October. If people want to get the details, they're on the website and book in. And obviously, you're right. That was something that's come up on broadcast recently, just this week. In fact, Tim's been talking about the importance of drawing on friendship. So there's a real appreciation out there for your honesty. So I just want to make that known. People are commenting on that and your vulnerability. So there's a question then. You talked about fear. I don't know if there's any more to add on kind of what you said about facing fear. And just obviously you guys are sharing very honestly here. What practical things, was there any other practical things, someone's asking, that you did to deal with the fears?
Well, I think you've got to voice it for a start, and kind of confess it, you know, in order to allow God to help you deal with it. And so if you've not taken that practical step of going and talking to someone that you trust, that you feel that you can be honest with, then that's essential, that first point. And praying that through with them and staying accountable then as you move forward. I think we've learned a benefit of discipline, spiritual discipline, but in the broadest sense. And so for me, a simple practical response to being afraid of going out was to go out. And so at least once a week, go for a walk just in the local area, go and sit in a you know, a greasy spoon or a local cafe and talk to someone, or try and engage with someone, because I can do that. I felt actually that could be the first step for me, and I think it's about taking small steps that you feel you have the capacity to take, so that show the Holy Spirit that you're wanting to change. And as you do that, he changes you. And so I go to a cafe down the road, I sit there, I get chatting, or for example, God was very kind. We went on Saturday to take our kids for a haircut, and we're in a local hairdresser's, and a guy comes in on this Saturday morning and sits next to me, and it's the lifeguard at the swimming pool that I go to during the week. And so we kind of have this awkward, we recognise each other, but
he's usually half naked.
Yeah, I'm normally in swimming trunks and he's sat at the side of the pool.
Awkward.
So it's a bit weird, but we've got something in common. And so I'm like, okay, I think this is probably God ordained, and so I'll step into the fear, and I can do this. I can talk to him, and so I just start a conversation, and it goes incredibly well. And I think God is very gracious in that as we show that we're willing to confront our fear or our shame or any of those things, as we show him we're serious about allowing him to change us and deal with them, he helps us and he guides us and he shows us that actually those things aren't anywhere near as bad as we probably thought they would be. And so actually I have very little reason to be afraid of the things I was afraid of, and he's showing me that actually it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, and that gives me faith and confidence for the next step and the next step.
Just coming in on that as well, I think you have to realise that each of our fears look different, and we have to deal with them differently. So I'm not afraid to talk to people. I'm very extroverted. I love gathering people, but that might fill John with dread. And it was working out between us what we had permission to do. I want to invite all the homeless to come and live with us. We had to work out, is that okay, with our kids living here? And so we're working out. We're having honest conversations about why we're afraid of stuff, and we heard something a while ago that said often fear masquerades itself as wisdom, and so you try to find a wise reason why you shouldn't do something, and it sounds very wise, but underneath it is fear. And so we continue to try and have conversations around that. And probably the biggest thing you do, I have found with fear, is running to Jesus, knowing him really well. If my relationship with him, if I'm looking to people to meet my need, I've missed it. I'm far more afraid. If I'm running to God and he's my source and I'm drinking from him and I'm loving him, I find that fear doesn't rear up as much. And when it does, I feel like, no, I'm loved, and and my Father's got this, and He wants to show Himself to this person. So all I've got to do is just say it and see what He does, and not feel the responsibility is on me to do anything special, but just to open my mouth and talk about being a Christian. And, oh, I noticed you're limping. Would you like me to pray for you? You know, like sometimes that's gone super awkwardly, and sometimes I've seen people healed, and it's been, so I think take some risks, ongoing risks, and I think that again, do it before the fear gets in almost. Quick risks has been helpful.
Phenomenal answer to that. I really hope that's, well, it's been incredibly challenging, but I hope that's been helpful for those of you that are asking about that.
To say, we're both still afraid. All of us are afraid. It's okay, but just keep doing it anyway.
Yeah, very honest. I'm conscious of time. I want to kind of go quickly through some of these, because there's still a few to go through, and I want to make sure that we at least touch on some of these. I think it's been very important to give time to that. A couple of questions regarding the church that you were part of, Jubilee Church, and the kind of sending thing, being so close to your parent church but not being a gathering but a separate church. How have you found this all strange? How have you distinguished yourself as a separate church is one, and also somebody's asked about how you manage the relationship, or how that's changed over the year as it's gone on. So if you can just give us some comments on that, be helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, wonderfully, God gave us a very clear vision for the church plant, which was quite different to Jubilee's vision, and so that led us on that path. I think we are friends with people who are in multi-site churches, and churches. There are churches in this city that have planted multiple congregations but remained one church, and we've just seen that over time those gatherings develop a vision and a heart for the area that they're in, to the point where effectively they are separate churches. They just have it's almost like they have a name that says that they're all the same, but in all practical terms and in terms of vision and heart for where they're at, they're different. And so we thought, let's call a spade and say, we're not going to try and keep something together unnecessarily. What we want to do is we want to be what God has promised, which is those two pillars of a bridge. So we are two separate churches. We have our own vision, our own way of working, and achieving what God has called us to do. But we know that when we do that together, we are far more effective at bringing people into the kingdom. And so our vision is that we will have two great churches in Hull that love one another, that send people to each other. So we can say, if someone comes to us and says, actually, you're not quite my kind of thing, we can go, great, there's another fantastic church down the road called Jubilee, go and try them, and vice versa. Working that out in the first year has been quite difficult because of our proximity. And so a lot of the things that might happen when you're church planting into a different town or a different city, in terms of kind of knowing, actually, we're not going to see people anymore. There's going to be that natural break. There's going to be that obvious kind of separation, and I think in some ways that makes it easier. That's not been there for us, and so we had our leaving service, and then I went to McDonald's on the way home and bumped into two people who were from Jubilee in the McDonald's, and it's weird because you're like, we've just said goodbye, but
hi again.
So that's been a little bit strange for people. It's kind of how do we maintain friendships with people that are in Jubilee that didn't come with us? Are we allowed to do that? How do we do that? And that's been quite difficult. And how do we relate as leaders back to the leadership of Jubilee? What is their relationship with us? There are very close connections still in some ways legally. We're still part of the same thing. We've not set up as a separate charity yet or any of that. I'm still employed by them part-time and all that sort of stuff. So it has not been simple, and it was not a clean break. And we have had to maintain good communication. That has just been key.
Which we haven't always got right. But
yeah. So, but when we don't get it right, we clearly communicate to each other that we've not got it right. So we talking to the leaders at Jubilee. They're talking to us. We're talking about some of the discomforts we have, some of the things that are going well for both of us, some of the things that aren't. We tried a joint prayer meeting and it didn't go brilliantly, but we were able to honestly talk about why that was, how we could change that in the future, how we want things to run. I think it was a very emotional occasion. It was strange, kind of all meeting up with people from the church we've left and not really knowing kind of how much to assert on your identity and how much to try and go back to how we were and all those sorts of things. So it's by no means simple, but you've just got to keep talking about it with your team, talking about it with the sending church, and we know that they love us and we love them, and that love will get us through these complications and the sticky bits to that place where we believe God wants us to be.
Just briefly, I think we had to be quite honest about managing our grief as well. For a while we wanted to distance ourselves because it was actually just really painful hearing about Jubilee and how they were getting on. They're doing amazing, yay! And we're not there. And it was just really hard to not be there for their first Christmas, to not be there for their 10-year anniversary. Painful stuff. And we've had to try and get the team to permission to voice their grief and walk that out together as a family.
Phenomenal. Really, really helpful. To question, a quick one, how many core people from Jubilee went with you then, in light of everything you shared?
No, we took, I think, about 25 adults. Jubilee were absolutely incredibly generous, and they gave us permission to ask just about anyone we wanted. They were very, very sacrificial in the way that they allowed us to take, to go and ask people, and just they gave us some amazing people, and it was a huge cost to them, I know. And yeah, so I think it was about 25 adults and various children. So we think we had about 30, just over 30 when we started.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm just conscious of time. We've got a couple more minutes. A brief one on and how your kids have coped. Someone's asking with moving to the smaller church.
Church-wise, they love it. I mean, church day is their favourite day of the week. Yeah. They're constantly counting down to it. What has really helped is that we have friends on the team who have kids the same sort of age, and so there's this little group of them, and they're all in it together, and they are bonded in a beautiful way. It's beautiful to see, and so they love church. They love calling it our church. They have a real sense of ownership of it. They're really excited about it. They talk to their friends at school about it all the time. So that's amazing. In the early days, moving house was hard. They loved our old house. We've moved into a much bigger house to facilitate the church plant, but it's not a house that we love. I mean, it's not. Our last house was far closer to what we dreamed we would always live in than this, and they found that hard. They've not settled as easily because of that. The school is more challenging for them, and the behaviour of the kids in the school has been something that they've had to adapt to, and they've not made friends as readily as they did in their last school, and that's been difficult, but it is changing. So we were so excited when they got their first birthday party invite, because they were just sad that they hadn't been making friends as easily. Judah, our youngest, was like, I want to have a friend like Freddie, who was his best friend in his last school, and we were grieving with him the loss of that really close friendship. And so the first time he got a party invite, first time he started to talk about a kid in his class who he's friends with, was a really joyous occasion for us. And so it's been hard for them, but I guess the bits that have been hard are the bits that would be hard about moving a family anywhere at any time. the church planting bit of it has been really good for them and really good for us as a family, and they've loved us talking about being on mission together as a family with them.
Oh, superb. Superb answer. I'm going to leave some of the other questions because the quality of what you've shared tonight is phenomenal. Honestly, your vulnerability, your willingness just to be this is us, and I'm sure will benefit many people that watch this. I want to end with, before I kind of wrap up and give the next date, if you had 30 seconds, a minute to, someone says, I'm interested in church planting, what would you say?
That's probably best answered by Abi, because I wasn't interested in church planting when this whole process started.
Have an honest conversation with your other half. I think ask God about it. Ask him to give you the faith for it. Ask him to speak prophetically about it, because we know it's not our idea, and therefore we know if it's his idea, that's great, because we're not selling anything of our own, and if it's his idea for you to go, it won't fail. And you know, there are ways that it could fail. There are things that won't go well. There will be ups and downs. But if he said go, then he's got a plan and a purpose for the people that you're about to go and reach. And I think we've got to follow with Jesus and say quietly radical yeses every day.
Fabulous. Oh my word, there's some quotes there. Guys, I just feel
on my blog.
Yeah, if you've got questions, track us down online and send us questions. We're happy to answer any questions that didn't get answered.
Well, there you've heard it here, people. If you have questions that are unanswered, these guys are happy to take them. You go on the website and River City Hull and contact them directly. And let's just drain these guys for all the help and wisdom that they've gleaned over the last year. Sorry, drain you. You're probably drained already.
Hours, yeah.
Oh, so I just say what an honour and a privilege. I've thoroughly enjoyed this evening. This wraps up this month's broadcast. I just encourage you, please go on Abi's blog, My Surrender Agenda, and Surrender My Agenda. Surrender My Agenda, and sign up and follow their story and be encouraged. As together we have a chance to pray for these guys and witness what God does in Hull. So please, if you feel called to join them, honestly, I'm sure they'd love to hear from you too. So thank you to Tim for interviewing, and thank you to all of you who joined us live and watched, and for those of you that are doing this on catch up. So you don't miss out on next one. The next broadcast is going to be on the 11th of May. You can, on our website, the Broadcast Network, put your details in and you'll get not just reminders of the broadcast live, but also you get links to other resources and wonderful things that are on there that come up every week. So please sign up for that. Next month, like I said, the 11th of May, Joel and Amy Kendall will be interviewed. So please, that will be really interesting to hear their story too. It's just been a cracking evening. Thank you so much. God bless, and we'll see you on the next one.